If you ever meet my cousin Brandon, you'll probably love him. Or at least, you'll think you do, until he opens his mouth. He's the kind of guy who walks into a room like he owns it, drops names like loose change, and somehow always ends up in the spotlight, even when no one invited him to begin with. Growing up, he was that kid. The one with the latest iPhone before the rest of us even knew a new model was coming out. The one who never got grounded because he had potential. The one whose mistakes were just youthful ambition, while mine were poor judgment. Yeah, that kind of cousin. My name's Ryan. I'm 33 now, but this all started when I was around 7 years old, sitting at the kids' table during Thanksgiving while Brandon bragged about the new go-kart his dad got him, just because. I still remember how the cranberry sauce on my plate looked like blood when I stabbed it too hard with my plastic fork. I hated how everyone laughed along as he listed off everything he'd gotten that month like it was some kind of royal decree. But I didn't say anything. Not then. Brandon was my mom's older sister's only child, which in our extended family might as well have made him the crown prince. Aunt Linda was one of those suburban matriarchs who dressed like every event was a charity gala and spoke with the slow, deliberate cadence of someone used to people hanging on to her every word. She married Uncle Greg, a lawyer with enough slickness to make a snake uncomfortable. Between them, they created Brandon, the golden child. Meanwhile, my mom raised me alone after my dad dipped before I was born. We didn't have much. Hand-me-downs, library books, and second-hand dreams were pretty much our currency. But we had grit, and we had each other. Still, every family event was a reminder that we were barely tolerated, like guests overstaying their welcome. Aunt Linda always forgot to tell us about the dress code. Uncle Greg made little comments about how hard it must be to manage on a single income. And Brandon? He'd perfected the art of the backhanded compliment by middle school. Oh, cool shoes, Ryan. Are those vintage? By the time we were in high school, the gap between us wasn't just financial. It was everything. He was captain of the debate team, his parents bought him a brand new BMW when he turned 16, and he had a college admissions coach by sophomore year. Meanwhile, I was flipping burgers after school, trying to save up for a busted 2002 Corolla I'd spotted in a neighbor's yard. I didn't hate him exactly. It was more complicated than that. I resented what he represented, what he got handed, what I had to fight tooth and nail for. Thanksgiving became a ritual of endurance. My mom would make green bean casserole and her famous pecan pie, dress up in her nicest Target sweater, and smile through the passive-aggressive jabs. I used to ask her why we still went, and she'd just say, because family's family. And sometimes, showing up is the best revenge. I didn't get it then. I do now. This past year. Though, this was the Thanksgiving everything changed. But before I get there, you need to understand something about how I spent the last decade. While Brandon went off to an Ivy League school, racked up LinkedIn connections like Pokemon cards, and started working for his daddy's friends and consulting, I kept my head down. I didn't post much on social media. I didn't go to reunions. I didn't tell anyone outside my mom what I was building. From the outside, I was just the quiet cousin who probably worked in IT or something. Nobody asked. Nobody cared. Behind the scenes, I had been working hard. I taught myself coding in college because I couldn't afford extra classes. I freelanced like my life depended on it. I made connections, launched products, failed, relaunched, failed again, and kept going. I started my own software company at 25. Scraped together seed funding by pitching at open mic nights. Lived on ramen and grit. And after years of near-constant rejection and barely sleeping, I finally hit a break. Then another. And another. It snowballed. By the time I was 32, I had 3 teams across 2 continents, a CTO I trusted like a brother, and a valuation hovering around the $25 million mark. But still, I said nothing to the family. It wasn't about hiding. It was about peace. Except peace was never an option where Brandon was involved. This year, Thanksgiving dinner was at Aunt Linda's McMansion, as always. The same granite countertops, the same meticulously polished silverware, and the same smug smile from Brandon as he leaned against the kitchen island, swirling a glass of overpriced Pinot like he was the host of some reality show about obnoxious relatives. "Oh, hey, Ryan," he said when I walked in, as if I'd wandered in off the street. "You still living in the city? Doing that little tech thing?" I smiled. "Yeah, still at it." "Huh. Good for you, man. Persistence is key. Even if the payout isn't big, at least you're your own boss, right?" I nodded. He smirked. We made small talk. Well, he talked, I listened. About his new Audi, his weekend in the Hamptons, the girl he was dating who modeled part-time, but not like the cheap Instagram kind. I didn't say much. Just let him ramble. He always did enjoy the sound of his own voice. Occasionally, he'd pepper in comments that landed like mosquito bites, annoying, easy to dismiss, but piling up fast. Aunt Linda called everyone to the table. The seating was, as always, suspiciously strategic. Brandon at the head of the table, Aunt Linda to his right. My mom and I tucked off to the side, like ornamental guests. We passed dishes, said grace, made polite conversation. And just as I was reaching for the stuffing, Brandon dropped the first real jab. So, Ryan, he said, loudly enough that even the cousins down the table paused their conversation. You ever think about doing something more stable? You know, a real job? Something with benefits? There was a beat of silence. My mom's fork hovered midair. I'm doing all right, I said carefully. I mean, yeah, but you're what, 30-something? No offense, but at some point, the whole startup dream thing becomes a little. He trailed off with a shrug and an apologetic smile. Just looking out for you, man. Aunt Linda chuckled. He's always been such a dreamer, our Ryan. But it's good to have passion, even if it doesn't always pan out. The cranberry sauce on my plate looked like blood again. I smiled. Just barely. Thanks for the concern. But I'm not too worried. Uncle Greg chimed in. You still living in that old apartment your mom helped you with a few years back? She didn't help, I said, sharper than I meant to. I paid for it myself. He raised his eyebrows, but Brandon jumped in before the tension could settle. You know what you should do? He said, eyes lit with fake enthusiasm. Take some business courses. Get a mentor. I could introduce you to some of my guys from school. They're always looking for assistants or junior developers. Thanks, I said. But I'm good. That's when he laughed. Actually laughed. Come on, man. Be real. There's no shame in asking for help. We're family. Something in me flickered. Not anger. Not yet. But a kind of awareness. A countdown starting in the back of my mind. He kept talking. About his six-figure bonus, his investment portfolio, the beach house he was looking into for Q1. He dropped terms like assets under management and diversified holdings like they were seasoning for the turkey. And through it all, my mom stayed quiet. She kept eating, kept smiling. I knew what she was thinking. I knew she wanted me to let it go. But something about that night, maybe it was the wine, maybe it was the years of holding my tongue, maybe it was just the sheer arrogance in Brandon's voice, made me pause. Because I had a secret. One I hadn't told any of them. One that would change everything if I dropped it into the middle of that perfectly curated dinner like a grenade. I looked across the table at Brandon, still rambling, still smug. And I smiled. I was done being quiet. But I didn't speak yet. Not just yet. First, I wanted to make sure they were really listening. And the moment came faster than I expected. Brandon always had this way of turning a normal conversation into a performance. Every sentence was a setup, every detail a humble brag, and every compliment a veiled jab. After years of hearing it, you'd think I'd be numb. But that night, it felt different. It wasn't just the way he looked at me, like I was still that scrawny kid eating off the chipped plate at the card table. It was the way everyone else looked at him, admiring, indulgent, like a favorite pet doing another one of his tricks. He was halfway through a story about some yacht party in Miami, the kind where you don't post pictures, if you know what I mean, when Aunt Linda interrupted. Brandon, sweetie, did you tell them about the Mercedes yet? He smirked, wiped his mouth with his napkin like some twisted royalty, and leaned back in his chair. Oh, right. Yeah, got the AMG last month. It's not even out in the States yet. One of my clients pulled a few strings. Someone down the table whistled. My uncle chuckled. That's my boy, he said, raising his glass. Meanwhile, my mom sat across from me cutting turkey into small, even pieces, like that would keep her hands from shaking. She hated these conversations, especially when they turned into a parade of everything Brandon had that I supposedly didn't. Not that she said anything. She never did. That was her way. Endure with grace. But this wasn't grace. This was something else. This was humiliation wrapped in linen napkins and served with sweet potatoes and smug smiles. So what about you, Ryan? Brandon asked, turning back to me with a theatrical curiosity. Still doing coding stuff? I sipped my water. Still running my company, yeah? Oh, right. He tilted his head. Freelance or product-based. SaaS and API integrations. Scalable platforms. He blinked. Huh. Then he looked around the table like I'd just recited a spell in Latin. Man, you always were the technical one. Aunt Linda gave a polite laugh, as if I'd made a joke. Then the moment I didn't see coming hit like a slap. Actually, she said, turning to my mom with the voice of someone ordering wallpaper samples, Linda Kavanaugh. You remember her, right? Her son works for Amazon now. Full-time. Stock options. You must be so proud, Ryan. My mom looked up, confused. Then she gave a tight-lipped smile. That's nice. But Ryan's doing well on his own. Aunt Linda waved her hand. Oh, of course. It's just nice to see young people find something secure these days. I clenched my jaw. Secure. That word again. Like I was a ticking time bomb of missed opportunities and bad decisions. Like I didn't know what I was doing with my life. Like everything I'd built was just some side project I'd abandoned when I grew up. Brandon took the cue. Actually, Mom, speaking of stability, I've been meaning to ask you something, Ryan. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice dropping to something falsely sincere. You ever think about selling? I know some investors who are scooping up micro companies like yours. You could make, I don't know, 6 figures? Maybe low 7s if you play your cards right. My mom looked at me, concern flickering across her face. I took a deep breath. We passed $20 million in ARR last quarter. Silence. It was the kind of silence that lands hard and shatters into a dozen confused glances. Even the clink of silverware stopped. Brandon blinked. Sorry, what? I looked him dead in the eye. Annual recurring revenue. Over $20 million. We closed a Series B round 6 months ago. Uncle Greg laughed, short and sharp. You're joking. I shook my head. Nope. We're valued just under $25 million right now. Planning a buyout in the next 18 months. Another beat of silence. Aunt Linda looked like someone had slapped her with a cold turkey leg. Brandon's mouth opened, then closed. My mom stared at me with wide eyes. You never told me that. I shrugged. Didn't think anyone wanted to hear about my little tech thing. Brandon scoffed. Come on, man. That's not how valuations work. You'd need, what? Teams, offices, legal, accounting. We have all of that, I said calmly. Outsourced the first few years, then built internal. 3 offices now. Amsterdam, Austin, and Singapore. 48 full-time employees, 39 contractors. He leaned back, his smirk twitching like it wanted to collapse into something less pretty. So you're saying you're sitting on $25 million? I'm saying the company is. I pay myself modestly. Most of it's in equity. Aunt Linda, bless her icy soul, recovered first. Well, she said, reaching for the wine. Isn't that something? But the vibe had changed. You could feel it. Like someone had flipped the power off and now all the glossy facades were dimming. No one really knew what to say. Except Brandon. He stood up, walked around the table, and clapped me on the back like we were frat brothers. Well, damn, cousin, he said loudly. Guess I underestimated you. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Guess so. That should have been the end of it. A clean shift. A new dynamic. Maybe even a little respect. But Brandon wasn't built for that. And neither was Aunt Linda. The mood at dinner didn't recover. Dessert was weirdly quiet. Brandon tried to pivot back into familiar territory. You ever meet Elon? You should talk to him. But his voice sounded brittle, like someone trying to keep their footing on a cracked sheet of ice. Aunt Linda, meanwhile, made a point of mentioning that Brandon's new condo had heated marble floors and actual Versace tile in the bathroom, which felt like the verbal equivalent of throwing a glitter bomb and hoping we'd all be impressed. We weren't. As people started to leave, my mom and I helped clear dishes. She didn't say much, just gave me a small nod that meant more than words. But then, as I was bringing in the last tray from the dining room, I heard it. I mean, who hides something like that from their family? Aunt Linda's voice, sharp and whispering through gritted teeth. It's deceptive. Manipulative. He's just trying to show off, Brandon muttered. Probably made half of it up. I paused behind the wall, out of sight. You know he used to copy my homework in middle school? Brandon added. Swear to God, Mom. This guy's a fraud. My hands tightened around the tray. He's always been like this, Aunt Linda replied. Lurking in the background, waiting to make a scene. Look at tonight. Thanksgiving, of all times. And what does he do? Drops a number like that in front of everyone. Everyone. It's tasteless. Unnecessary. And frankly, I don't believe it. A pause. Should have been Brandon, she whispered. He's the one with real connections. That's when I stepped into the room. They froze, like actors caught out of character. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just looked them both in the eye. I built it from nothing, I said quietly. No trust fund. No connections. No help. And the only reason I never said anything before tonight was because I was trying to protect this. I gestured around the room. This illusion of family. Brandon opened his mouth, but I kept going. I thought maybe if I stayed quiet long enough, you'd stop seeing me as the poor kid in the corner. But now I get it. It was never about me. It was about keeping Brandon on his pedestal. Aunt Linda straightened. Ryan, that's not fair. No, I said. What's not fair is watching my mom sit through 20 years of your condescension. Listening to you mock our clothes, our jobs, our lives, while pretending it's all in good fun. That ends tonight. I turned to go, but then Brandon muttered, still sounds like a fluke. I stopped. Excuse me. He shrugged. Anyone can get lucky. Doesn't make you special. I stared at him. Really stared. And in that moment, I saw it. The crack. The insecurity beneath all the gloss. Because the truth was, he needed to believe it was luck. He had to. Otherwise, he'd have to face what I'd done with nothing while he'd coasted on everything. Tell you what, I said. I'll bring you by the office next week. Maybe seeing it up close will help. He laughed, but it was hollow. I mean it, I said, stepping closer. I'll even let you pitch. We're hiring interns. His smirk vanished. And that's when Uncle Greg walked in, drink in hand, and said, What is going on in here? My mom came in right behind him. Then, as if the universe wanted to etch this moment into family history, Brandon snapped. You know what? I'm out. He stormed out. Actually stormed. Grabbed his coat, slammed the door. Everyone in the living room stared. And Aunt Linda? She turned to my mom and said, This is why we don't mix ambition with insecurity. Then Uncle Greg tossed his drink down, right onto the floor, and muttered, Unbelievable. Everyone was looking at us now. My mom took my hand. And in that moment, I realized we had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The drive home that night was quiet. Too quiet. Mom didn't say anything at first. She just stared out the window, hands folded in her lap, her expression unreadable. The only sound was the soft hum of the car and the occasional crunch of leaves under the tires as we turned onto the dark streets leading back to our neighborhood. I wanted to say something. Apologize, maybe. Or explain why I finally said something after all those years of silence. But part of me couldn't tell if she was mad or just tired. Tired of enduring. Tired of holding her breath for 2 decades every time we walked into that McMansion like we didn't belong. Tired of pretending we were just grateful to be included. When we finally pulled into the driveway, she spoke. So softly, I almost missed it. You didn't have to do that. I turned off the engine. I know. She looked at me. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were damp. But I'm glad you did. We sat there for a moment longer. Then she got out and walked into the house, carrying nothing but the pie dish she'd baked earlier that day. Untouched, of course. No one had even looked at it. Not with Aunt Linda's organic, imported, hand-whipped dessert options laid out like a bakery showroom. I followed her inside, closed the door, and stood in the darkened hallway for a second, unsure of what to do with the strange mixture of anger and sadness settling in my chest. It wasn't victory. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was mourning. For what? I wasn't sure. The illusion of family, maybe. The years I spent hoping I'd one day be one of them. I thought success would bridge the gap. Turns out, it just made it wider. The days that followed were tense, but not for the reasons I expected. Brandon didn't reach out. Neither did Aunt Linda. Not even a half-hearted, let's talk message or a performative phone call trying to patch things up. Instead, the silence stretched, loud, deliberate, and heavy. Then came the whispers. It started with a cousin I hadn't spoken to in months sending me a screenshot of a group text. One of Brandon's friends had apparently started circulating a story that I'd faked my company's valuation. Another said I'd bought fake followers and bots to inflate my LinkedIn presence. Someone else claimed I was being investigated for fraud, though no one could explain by whom. I laughed at first. I really did, because it was so transparent. But then the rumors started leaking into my professional world. A former colleague emailed me. Hey, man. Someone forwarded me a weird message claiming your company isn't legit. You might want to look into it. An investor pinged me. Just wanted to confirm. Everything's above board, right? We're hearing some chatter. That's when the laughing stopped. I launched an internal review. Had legal triple-check all our documentation. PR crafted a formal response in case anything hit the media. It didn't, but the effort it took just to stay ahead of a lie was exhausting. I didn't even need evidence to know where it was coming from. The timing, the language, the tone, all of it screamed Brandon. He might not have typed the words himself, but I had no doubt he'd given someone the green light to smear me. Quietly, from the shadows. The thing is, when you grow up around people like Brandon, you learn how they operate. They don't confront. They corrode. Slowly, subtly, just enough to plant doubt. Just enough to make you look unstable or untrustworthy without ever getting their hands dirty. And for a while it worked. We lost a partnership deal. A big one. A client we'd been nurturing for almost a year suddenly went cold. No explanation, no follow-up, just radio silence. That was the moment I cracked. I remember sitting alone in my apartment, my real apartment, the one no one in the family had ever seen, with the city lights glowing through the window and my laptop open, displaying a blank email draft. I stared at it for nearly an hour, thinking, do I go public? Do I call him out? Do I release our financials, show the numbers, name names? But deep down, I knew something else. That's what he'd do. He'd get loud, messy, make it a spectacle. But I wasn't him. I was something else. So I deleted the draft. And I started over. Not the company. We were solid, even with the noise. But me. My mindset. My sense of worth. I took a break from social media. Deleted the LinkedIn app from my phone. I stopped refreshing email like it held the key to my sanity. I went for long walks without my earbuds. Reconnected with old mentors. Not to network, but to just talk. I spent more time with my mom. Helped her with her garden. Cooked dinner without checking Slack every 10 minutes. Slowly, I found the version of myself I liked. Not the one chasing approval. Not the one quietly competing with a cousin who never played fair. Just me. I still ran the company, of course. But I stopped letting it define me. I started working on a new product in secret. Something smaller. More personal. A platform to help first-generation entrepreneurs access tools and mentorship without paying thousands for webinars or boot camps. I didn't announce it. I didn't raise money. I just built it. Nights, weekends, between meetings. Quietly. Like planting seeds no one else could see. One day, my mom walked into my home office with 2 mugs of tea and said, "You look lighter." I looked up from my laptop. Lighter? She nodded. Like you're not carrying so much. I thought about it. Maybe I'm just carrying different things now. She smiled. Good. Let Brandon carry the rest. The thing is, I hadn't spoken his name since that night. Neither had she. Not once. It was like we'd both agreed, without saying it, that he no longer had space in our heads. But life, of course, had other plans. A few months later, I got an invitation. A real printed card. Thick stock, embossed letters. Engagement party, Brandon and Alina. Hosted at a private vineyard. Dress code, black tie. I blinked. Alina. That name tugged at something. And then I remembered. She was the girl Brandon had been bragging about last Thanksgiving. The part-time model. Classy, but not stuck up, he'd said. Knows how to be arm candy and hold a conversation. I tossed the invite on my desk and didn't think much of it. Until the second card arrived a few weeks later. We'd love to see you there, cousin. Let's put the past behind us. Brandon. Handwritten. I stared at it for a long time. Because something about the tone felt off. Too eager. Too polished. I checked the return address. It wasn't just a vineyard. It was the same one my company had been scouting for a potential client retreat. I hadn't mentioned it to anyone. Coincidence? Maybe. But then I opened my inbox later that day and found a forwarded email. One of my vendors had been contacted by someone claiming to represent me, asking for pricing comparisons and behind-the-scenes details of our event planning process. The name on the email? Brandon Klein. No title. No explanation. Just a name. The vendor hadn't replied. She thought it was strange and wanted to make sure it wasn't me. And just like that, I knew. This wasn't about reconciliation. This wasn't about peace. This was about control. Brandon was trying to fish for intel. To sabotage. Or maybe just to see how far he could push before I pushed back. But he'd made one mistake. He'd invited me into his world. And for the first time, I wasn't walking in as the underdog. I was walking in as the man who'd built an empire while they weren't looking. But I didn't RSVP. Not yet. Because the next move had to be careful. Calculated. Clean. Brandon wanted me in his story. He had no idea I was writing my own. The invite sat on my desk for a full week before I touched it again. I'd left it there on purpose, right next to the prototype sketch for my new startup. One card, thick and glossy, daring me to walk back into the same circle that mocked my ambition for years, now pretending it was water under the bridge. There was no bridge, just wreckage. And Brandon was acting like he hadn't spent the last few months lighting matches behind my back. But I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the wild, hot way that makes you want to punch a wall or scream into your steering wheel. No, this was colder, focused, like a lens snapping into place. Brandon had just handed me something he didn't realize had value, an opening. And if I played this right, I wasn't just going to get closure. I was going to rewrite the family script. Mom was hesitant, of course. When I casually mentioned I might show up to the engagement party, she put down her tea mid-sip and said, "Why would you want to go back into that circus?" "I'm not going back," I said. "I'm walking in." She narrowed her eyes. "And doing what exactly?" "Watching," I said. "Listening. Gathering data." She gave me that look she used to give when I tried to convince her I wasn't sneaking snacks past bedtime. But she didn't press. She knew me well enough to know when something was brewing. And something was. See, Brandon had always underestimated me. That was his fatal flaw. He thought I was some scrappy coder who got lucky. He didn't know the version of me that had spent years negotiating contracts with multi-million-dollar companies, handling due diligence with sharks in suits, or pulling 18-hour days to patch a critical exploit minutes before a global rollout. He'd never seen that side of me, because I never let him. Until now. The first thing I did was research the venue. The vineyard was high-end, no doubt, but not some untouchable celebrity estate. It was a prestige brand masquerading as exclusive, but it had chinks in the armor. I knew the event manager through an old college friend, someone I'd helped build a restaurant POS system years ago, back when I was taking freelance gigs just to cover rent. One phone call later, I had eyes on the guest list, floor plans, catering schedule, and, most importantly, the AV setup. I told her I was scouting the location for a tech retreat and asked if she had security protocols in place for private corporate launches. She sent me a full brochure. Brandon had no idea. Then came phase 2, rewriting the narrative. I knew that in Brandon's mind, I was still the outsider, the tech cousin who got lucky and overreacted at Thanksgiving, which meant his version of the story, the one he'd probably been spoon-feeding to relatives over wine and cheese, painted him as the gracious host trying to make peace. I needed to flip that, but not by confronting him. No, that would only feed his drama addiction. Instead, I started showing up in small ways where he'd least expect it. A panel on digital entrepreneurship at a university alumni event, one where he was scheduled to attend, not speak. I got myself invited last minute. Gave a keynote. Didn't say a word to him. Just let my name echo through the room while people took selfies and asked for advice. An op-ed I published in a major tech outlet, discussing quiet success and the value of building without validation. A subtle nod to family dynamics, gatekeeping, and resilience. It went semi-viral. A few of my extended relatives even shared it on Facebook with comments like, "So proud of our Ryan," clearly unaware of the veiled subtext. Then came the tech podcast. A rising creator asked me to do a deep dive on bootstrapping to millions. I agreed. I told my story, left out the names, but laced every anecdote with enough detail that anyone who knew the family would recognize who I meant. You ever get invited to a dinner where everyone's eating gold-plated steak and you brought lasagna in a Tupperware? I joked at one point. Yeah, that's when I knew I had to build my own table. The clip blew up. Brandon didn't reach out, but I knew he saw it. He was too vain not to be watching. By the time the party was a week away, the pieces were moving. My legal team had finalized the paperwork on my new startup. The mentorship platform, codenamed North Node, was ready for soft launch. We'd onboard 50 users from underserved communities, with free access to tools that cost hundreds elsewhere. I didn't need to profit off of it. It was built for impact, and it was personal, because deep down, I'd always wanted to create the thing I never had, a path for the kids who weren't born with the Brandon starter pack. But the true masterstroke came when I looped in my old friend Milo. Milo had been my first real business partner back when I was still figuring out how invoices worked. He was loud, charismatic, and ran a boutique PR firm now. He owed me a favor from way back, something about helping him out of a disastrous crypto sponsorship. "Whatever you need," he told me over the phone. You want me to crash the party dressed like a magician? Fake a scandal? Nothing that messy. I laughed. Just need a spotlight. I gave him the details. The date. The time. The guest list. And one very specific name. Brandon's boss. Turns out, Brandon wasn't as entrepreneurial as he liked to claim. He'd spun his current role into something more impressive than it was, strategic consultant, whatever that meant. But according to Milo's background team, he was clinging to a job at a mid-sized firm trying to break into AI. And the CEO of that firm? Milo had worked with him on a failed app launch a year prior. Bring him as a +1, I said. Done, Milo said. You're sure you want to do this? I'm sure. That Friday, I got the final confirmation I'd been waiting for. The vineyard was ready. Brandon's team had requested extra AV equipment for a presentation segment. I knew what that meant. A slideshow. Probably pictures of him and Alina looking perfect. Maybe a toast. Maybe a career brag. A chance to impress. And a chance to hijack. But not with chaos. With clarity. I had one more call to make. Hey man, I said, dialing an old contact from my accelerator days. You still have access to those portable mini projectors? The discreet kind. Sure do, he replied. Got an event? Something like that. Saturday arrived like a slow drum roll. I wore a tailored charcoal suit. Clean, minimal, sharp. No flashy watch. No designer label screaming for attention. Just confidence. The kind that doesn't need permission to walk into a room. When I arrived, the venue was buzzing. Champagne flutes clinked under golden chandeliers strung between vineyard trellises. Guests milled around in curated semi-casual elegance, all laughing a bit too loudly and hugging like they'd just closed million-dollar deals. Brandon was at the center of it all. Of course. Tan. Grinning. Arm draped around Alina like a human trophy case. He spotted me within seconds. His face twitched, but only for a moment. Then he walked over, smiling. Ryan, he said, voice just loud enough for the nearest cluster to hear. Didn't think you'd show. Just here to celebrate, I said, matching his tone. Appreciate it, he replied, leaning in. Guess you finally figured out how to wear real suits, huh? I smiled. Guess you finally figured out how to invite people. He flinched, just barely, then walked away. For the next hour, I mingled. Polite. Distant. Watching. Waiting. At 8:20 p.m., the lights dimmed. Brandon took the mic. Thanks everyone for being here, he said. Tonight's not just about love. It's about legacy. I almost choked on my drink. He went on about hard work, vision, sacrifice. About how building something real takes guts. About how he and Alina were planning a new venture. Real estate tech, of all things. And how they were always looking for strategic partners. Then came the slideshow. Photos. Logos. Fancy terms that didn't mean anything. One slide even showed a mock-up of a platform that looked suspiciously like North Node. I stared at it, and I knew. He'd stolen it. Or tried to. The code was different. The branding was off. But the flow, the layout, the purpose, it was mine. The vendor I'd caught snooping weeks ago must have leaked enough for Brandon to fake a pitch deck. I should have been furious. But instead, I felt calm. Because this was perfect. He was about to fly too close to the sun. And I was holding the matches. The room went dark again as Brandon transitioned to the final slide, a dramatic mock-up of his new platform. A logo flickered on screen, a clunky, half-baked design that looked like it had been thrown together by someone who thought Canva made you a designer. The tagline underneath read, Empowering Young Visionaries. Unlocking Potential. The future is now. I almost laughed. Not because of the message, but because the layout, the structure, the whole thing, was ripped from an internal North Node pitch deck I'd shared with exactly 3 people in a password-protected folder. So that confirmed it. Brandon wasn't just posturing anymore. He was stealing. And now, he was doing it on a projector screen in front of 100 guests, at a vineyard filled with local influencers, tech investors, and a CEO who already thought Brandon was a fraud. The same CEO who was, at that very moment, standing at the back of the room with Milo, whispering something and shaking his head slowly. Brandon was still speaking. I've always believed in leading with vision, with purpose. And when Alina and I sat down to sketch out this idea, we knew we were onto something big, something that could change the world. I reached into my jacket pocket and clicked the button on the remote I'd synced to the venue's secondary projector, the one my contact had discreetly connected earlier that day behind the main display. The screen behind Brandon suddenly went black. He paused, confused. Then, a new slide popped up. Pure white background. One sentence in bold, black font. This is what real vision looks like. Gasps. Murmurs. A few laughs. Brandon turned around. What the? Before he could finish, the screen changed again. Slide 1. A time-stamped email chain from my inbox with subject line. North Node prototype access. Confidential. Slide 2. The original North Node dashboard design, side by side with the one Brandon had just shown. Slide 3. A highlighted paragraph from a non-disclosure agreement with the vendor who'd leaked information, signed by someone named C. Danner, Brandon's college roommate. Slide 4. A list of known IP addresses that had accessed our development portal without permission. One of them matched the Wi-Fi network named BrandonHomeNet_5G. And then, Slide 5. A video clip of me, taken just 2 weeks earlier during an early North Node onboarding session. In the clip, I'm saying, we don't just build tools. We build ladders for kids who've been told they're not allowed to climb. Silence. Real, echoing silence. Brandon was frozen. His mouth slightly open, eyes wide, still holding the mic like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Then Milo stepped forward. Loud, confident, charismatic. Folks, he said, grinning. Sorry for the surprise presentation, but we figured you deserved to see the real future. He gestured to me. This is Ryan Klein, founder and CEO of North Node. His platform's already helping young entrepreneurs across 3 continents. No fake decks. No stolen designs. Just impact. Real, measurable impact. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I just met Brandon's gaze across the room. He tried to speak. Wait, this isn't. But no one was listening. Because now people were whispering, pointing, pulling out their phones. Then came the voice that sealed it all. Brandon's boss. He stepped forward slowly, holding a glass of red wine like he was about to perform a toast. I had my doubts, he said, voice smooth but stern. But this is something else. Brandon turned toward him, pleading. Sir, I didn't know. Someone must have sent that deck. I thought it was a reference. The CEO held up a hand. Don't. Just don't. He turned to Milo. Can I speak to you and Mr. Klein outside? Milo winked. Of course. As the 3 of us walked past Brandon, I paused. By the way, I said quietly, leaning in so only he could hear. You should probably stop using public Wi-Fi to steal code. He stared at me, stunned. I didn't wait for a response. Outside, under the vineyard's canopy lights, the air smelled like grapes and gasoline. The CEO shook my hand. Hell of a move in there. I shrugged. Just tired of being polite. I respect that. He pulled out a business card. If you're ever looking for acquisition partners, real ones, give me a call. I nodded. I'll think about it. Milo chuckled. That went better than planned. I'm not done, I said, because the real fallout hadn't even started. By the next morning, the video of the vineyard incident was circulating on Instagram stories and Twitter. Someone had recorded the moment the screen switched. Another had zoomed in on Brandon's face when the slide about the IP address showed up. A tech blog picked it up by noon. By Sunday, Brandon's LinkedIn profile was deactivated. By Monday, I got a call from my mom. Her voice was cautious. Ryan, did you really need to go that far? I took a breath. Maybe not. But he wasn't going to stop, Mom. Not until he broke something I built. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, You didn't break him. He did that to himself. And she was right. Brandon didn't just lose a job or a reputation. He lost the one thing he built his identity around, the illusion of success, the curated persona, the constant performance. And without it, he was just a guy in a suit with nothing to say. 3 weeks later, I launched North Node officially. We got press. Investors reached out. I declined most of them. I wanted to keep it clean. I wanted to keep it mine. Mom came to the launch, wore her best coat, cried when she saw the first mentorship circle form around a group of teenagers from low-income schools. This is what you've been doing all these nights, she asked, wiping her eyes. Yeah, I said. This is what I've been building while they weren't watching. I never saw Brandon again after the party. But I heard he tried to apply for a job at a startup accelerator a few towns over. Didn't get it. Apparently, one of the interviewers had been at the vineyard that night. Small world. Funny how that works. You grow up thinking the best revenge is proving them wrong. But it's not. The best revenge is proving yourself right and letting them choke on the silence that follows. Because I didn't just build a business. I built a legacy, one they'll never be able to copy.